Alright, welcome to another video here on the Biology Homework Lab, and what we're going to be looking at here is the structure of the human brain. And so basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be going through the different parts of the brain, and you probably may even have a worksheet in front of you, or you've drawn a diagram of the brain and you're going to be annotating that diagram and putting the bits and pieces on it. This is aimed for around about middle school science type thing, so of course if you're doing senior biology you need a lot more detail than what we've got in this video. But before we start, let's just do a bit of active revision. Right? I don't want you to sit there and do some crunches with your notes like this guy here, but what I'm saying here is we need to be constantly challenging our brain to pull the knowledge out of our brain to the front of our understanding rather than just opening a book and reading notes. That looking over your note technique does not work. You have to actively force your brain to retrieve that. If you can't remember it, then you look at your notes and that's a reminder, okay, I need to highlight that, I need to go over that. But let's do some active revision. Can you remember from a previous video the two parts of the nervous system? The central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Great. And when we talked about the central nervous system, we said it was broken up into two main sort of parts or organs. What were they? The brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so we're actively retrieving the information here. And the peripheral nervous system is what we're going to be looking at in a later part, because now we're going to focus in on the main part of our central nervous system, the brain. All right, so let's have a look at some parts of the brain here. We can see this guy here and a bit of get an understanding of the size of the brain into a normal person's skull. What you probably may not recognize though is that this is your nasal cavity here, this is your mouth, this is your tongue there by the way, it's a very thick big muscle. So you open up and at the back of your throat you have your uvula which hangs down. Now of course the function of that is to, when you breathe in and eat, when you eat, you want this here to block off that passage there, so when you chew and swallow, none of your food goes up and into your nasal cavity. That would be pretty poor. You may have experienced eating and laughing at the same time to the point where this gets a little bit confused because you're trying to swallow and you're trying to breathe, and then to the point where food goes up into your nose. But this is goes to the back of the throat here and then goes down in your esophagus there. So our cerebrum, which is our main part of the brain, which most people recognize as when we talk about the brain, is that walnut type structure that people know. It's known as the cerebral cortex. And sometimes it's also the cerebrum as well. It's made of two halves or two hemispheres. So half of your brain, so the right half controls the left half of your body, your left half controls the right half of your body. So it's pretty cool because doctors can know by looking at a patient if they all of a sudden lose part of their muscles on one side of their body, that's telling them that where that stroke or something could be happening. Now, it involves thinking. So our cerebrum involves the thinking parts such as sound, fine movement, speaking, etc. All right, so make sure you pause that and you've got that down for your diagram, and then we'll move to the next one. Okay, now we're going to be looking at something called the meninges, right? And the meninges are membranes that surround the spinal cord and the brain. So they're membranes. You can see here it's outlined in red there, and they protect the brain and the spinal cord. In fact, there's a little bit of fluid within the meninges. If you can imagine two sheets of paper, and each sheet of paper is a membrane, and in between that is some fluid, right? And so I guess you could sort of say it's like a balloon, if you will, holding some liquid in there. And so that liquid protects the brain from shock. So when you fall over and hit your head, there's a little bit of fluid there to stop your brain smacking really hard against your skull, right? Which bones are sharp. So it gives you a little bit of protection there and a little bit of nourishment. So that's what the meninges are. The corpus callosum is this section here right in the middle, and that there allows transfer of signals between one side of your brain and the other. Okay, and you can see it there. So that's where our brain communication occurs between the two hemispheres. And this is an interesting fact, the corpus callosum in females is a little bit bigger than in males. And so a lot of students find that out and go, hey, my brain talks better than yours. But that's the corpus callosum. The next one's called the medulla oblongata. So we're moving down to this section of the brain here, the oblongata just down there, and that is to do with breathing, right? A very, very basic or primeval thing that we need to do is you need to breathe. And so this part of the brain, which when you do further biology will known as the brain stem, it's very primitive parts of the brain. You don't have to think about it, you're breathing, okay? Then we move into the pons. The pons is a little bit higher up here in the brain stem there. It controls breathing as well. Eye movements is another thing that happens with the pons as well. Then we look at the midbrain here. The midbrain is just that little bit higher. So it's up here now. The midbrain controls eye, auditory sound, and visual processing. So you can see there's a bit of an overlap between some of the functions in this sort of region here, right? This is a very primitive brain, and this is the advanced part of our brain. If you were to look at different animals, you'll see that we have the largest cerebellum compared to our body size of all the animals, and very primitive animals only have very small cerebrums with their brainstem. Okay, then we go to something called the hypothalamus. Okay, you can see here it's this little section here, the hypothalamus, just underneath the corpus callosum there, right, or just there I should say. There's the hypothalamus, because our thalamus is above that. So our hypothalamus is just there, and it controls body temperature and releases hormones that affect other parts of the body. So this is where we're getting a crossover between the nervous system and the endocrine system. The endocrine system is to do with hormones. Then we have our thalamus, which is a bit higher there, controls sleep, and it passes signals to the rest of the brain. So the signals come up through here, and then they go up into the rest of the brain. So that is part of the thalamus's job. Then we have a little gland called the pituitary gland, which is just there. Very small gland, but it's very important because it releases other hormones that affects other parts of your body, such as the adrenal glands, which is just on the top of your kidneys there. And it is involved in growth and reproduction. So, of course, after every single function here, you're pausing the video, you're writing the things down, and then you're coming back and then making sure you get all this information. You're not just watching it in one go. And then we have a question for you. How does your brain diagram look? Does it look something like this one? Okay, you should have functions now for all the different parts from what I've sort of said in the video, and it should be colored, because remember, we remember things by color. We don't learn in black and white. And so by coloring it allows you to remember a lot more information than just having black and white. Okay, so hope that makes sense to you. You've got all the information down, you've got your sheet done, and if you haven't, take your time, get the detail down, see if you can add some extra bits from this video or other parts of your research into your diagram, and I'll see you in the next video.